I'll try again. Sorry about that. If you were watching my one before, it didn't rotate. So, I've been engaged in the last few days on discussions on Facebook. I'm someone that started keeping pigeons when I was 12, and off and on for the last 30 years, I've kept birds. And I have always, even if I haven't been keeping birds, I've been keeping my BHW subscription, and I'm looking to start keeping birds again soon. And for 30 years, pretty much, we've been hearing about how the sport is declining in the UK, and I've been engaged in the last few days with conversations about the sale of Armando and what different people's opinions are. And you've got two different people's opinions. You've got, it's madness, how can a bird sell for £1 million, and the world's gone mad. And then you've got other people who I agree with that say it's a good thing for the sport for many reasons, and I agree with that. I think the sale of that bird on Sunday, the publicity alone that it's given the sport, is worth tens of thousands of pounds to the sport. And for those of you that say that it's a working man's sport and it's too expensive to keep birds, well, ultimately the cost of keeping birds is always going to be increasing, because the raw cost, the materials, i.e. the corn and the medication, is going to keep rising. But outside of that, it doesn't mean that anybody that can't afford to pay large money has to. I still insist that a good fancier that knows what they're doing can compete with any of these big money birds, especially in one-off races, because the playing field is leveled to a certain degree. It's the same as horse racing. You get relatively cheap horses that do compete, and over a period of time manage to beat very expensive horses. So the mentality of the world's gone mad and £1 million pigeons is ridiculous and it's a bad thing for the sport and it's keeping the working man out of it. No, it's not. It's no different to how it was 20 years ago. It's just the numbers have got bigger. And like I said, the publicity that the sale of that bird on Sunday has got around the world, it's invaluable for the sport. You know, Ian Evans has been on TV and radio for pretty much all week. And that's what we need. And ultimately, I'm of the opinion that money, and bigger money, needs to come into this sport for it to thrive. It's the same with a lot of sports, specifically horse racing. There's many parallels to horse racing in this. But if you look at sports like darts, 20 years ago, darts was dead. Now there's money come into it, and it's a big thing. And it's getting a lot of spectators that have got no real interest in darts as such. They've never played darts themselves, but they go and watch it, or they watch it on the TV. And that's what we need as a sport. And ultimately, the more money that comes into a sport, yes, it creates a business out of it, but there's always been businesses around pigeon racing for years. You know, I can remember in 1988 when Invincible Spirit was bought. It was 130,000 euros or something at the time. And at the time, I said, one day there'll be £1 million pigeon. And sure enough, last Sunday morning, that happened. Business in a sport is not a bad thing. It's businesses that keep sports going and that bring more money into the sport. That's what we desperately need, specifically here in the UK. I think there's a big difference in the mentality of a pigeon fancier in the UK. Again, big generalisation, because I know a lot of people agree with me on this, but a lot don't, compared to colleagues in Europe. Thomas, pleased to see you tuning into my thoughts on this. I'm talking about the sale of Armando. I think there's a big difference in the EU and people that keep birds in the EU and around the world compared to the UK. And we need to shift that mentality. The mentality needs to shift if this sport is not just going to survive, but thrive. From what I know, the numbers are way down in the UK compared to 30, 20 years ago when I was keeping birds as a boy. Something needs to change. Now, the reality is some sweeping, massive changes have got to happen for us. I don't care about it continuing to survive. I want to see it thriving, because deep down, at the end of the day, to me, the core thing that hooked me many years ago when I was 12 years old and I started keeping racing pigeons was the idea that you could send this pigeon away and it could fly 500 miles on the same day back to you. That to me is fascinating, and we've got to bring that fascination to the masses. People that are probably never ever going to keep pigeons. That's the hard part. How can we bring people interested and get people's interest so where they're involved but they're not actually keeping birds? Now, I was lucky enough to go to the South African One Loft race in the first year that it actually started, and they were having a hard time back then because people were very anti One Loft races. That's not how pigeon racing happens. That's not how we do it. And sure enough, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, the proliferation of One Loft races, the tide has changed. And I think One Loft races are a massively great thing for this sport. Because one, it levels the playing field, all birds are getting trained the same. But two, it does open, over a long period of time, the ability for non-pigeon fanciers to be involved. Imagine this. There was a horse that ran in Cheltenham races last week, and this horse won, and it was actually owned by thousands of people, which is pretty unique. I realise syndicates are a lot smaller than that normally. Imagine, why can we not have eventually birds racing in One Loft races that are owned by people that have never kept a pigeon in their life? Syndicates of people. That's one of the big things that we can do to make sure that one, money comes in, and two, people come in and the interest is there. We need to up our game. We have got to up the game of how this plays out over the next 10, 20 and 30 years. Why is betting so prevalent in China but not really here? We need to change that. If we can include betting and the betting of pigeons on a proper basis, using proper systems and fair and trusted systems, that's something else we should be looking to do as well. So I reckon One Loft races are the best thing to happen to this sport, because it has the potential down the line where somebody can either invest in a pair of birds, and all of those the youngsters from those birds go into One Loft races and compete around the world, or people can buy birds to compete in them. People that have never kept a pigeon never will keep a pigeon. That's the biggest thing. To get up and running in this business, you need to be, in the sport of it, you need to be competing with a loft every single day looking after birds. And that's a big barrier of entry to a lot of people. It's not going to happen. For instance, for me, when I start keeping birds again, I won't be racing locally, nationally. I haven't got the time. I run various businesses and I haven't got the time. What I'll be doing is I will be accumulating some of the best birds I can in a stock loft. I will have a few birds flying out because I just love seeing birds fly out. But I won't be racing. I will be putting those birds into One Loft races all around the world. And that's what I'll be doing. That's going to be my plan. Now you take that and you up it one more level and you say, okay, let's provide people, regular people, the ability to be able to compete in One Loft races. There's a few issues we have. I know One Loft races live stream stuff, and there's a big difference with horse racing. Horse racing, a race is over within 10 minutes, people can see the winner. There's a few things we need to figure out, like how can average Joe who's got a bird racing in a race see that bird come in and know when it's come in and know where it's come? But technology now means we can do that stuff. There's so much we can do moving forward, and I see the potential. Outside looking in, I see the potential to make this happen. One Loft races are a massive thing. The sale of large amount of money pigeons, I think, is a great thing. I think one of the biggest things we've got to do is got to make sure that not all of the very best birds in the world within the next 10 years end up in China. And specifically in the UK, if you look at what Pippa have done, Pippa have revolutionized this industry. Whether people like it or not, they've revolutionized the industry. They're signing exclusive agreements with people left, right and centre. And I take my hat off to what those guys have done. But in the UK, we haven't got that big marketing. There's some obviously there's some UK fanciers that Pippa represent, but our birds are not represented as strongly as European birds, specifically Dutch and Belgian birds. That needs to change as well. There's a big potential there for that to happen. We got to up the game to be able to market some of the great birds that are in the UK and Ireland. We've got to do that. So that's just some of what I reckon can happen. But at the moment, it's very fragmented. There needs to be more of a global reach, bringing people around the world. Obviously, social media, Facebook is a great thing. Why is there not a dedicated racing pigeon social media platform out there that represents and has people involved all around the world? Why has that not happened? Why is there not a global publication for racing pigeons, and not just specifically for fanciers? Why is there not publications out there that will attract non-pigeon fanciers into the sport, whether it be not keeping them but entering them or getting involved? Money coming in, like I said, money coming in will only help because it will filter down to every level. Why are there not different leagues of racing? It happens within in football, it happens within horses. Why are there not different leagues? Because with football, you've got the Premiership, but equally you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of Sunday League games. I'm not a big football fan, but I know there's hundreds, if not thousands, of Sunday League games happening all around the UK on every Sunday morning. And the guys that are either watching that or playing in it, they're not interested in the money. They're just interested in the love of playing football. And it's the same thing with this sport. You've got some people out there that just love flying their pigeons. They're not got any interest in money. They're not interested in selling their birds, not interested in competing for money. But at the same time, you've got people, albeit like me, that are interested in what could be potentially earned from racing in these big races. And I think if they're run well, one-off races are a big part of the future. I've kind of seen it over the last 3 or 4 years where it's really taking off. There's more one-off races around the world now than there's ever been, and that's a good thing. My very first trip to the USA when I was 17 years old, I went to see the San Diego Classic one-off race, and it was the South African race and 1 or 2 other smaller races. That was it. Now fast forward all these years, one-off racing's taken over. You got the championship of one-off races. You've got studs breeding birds specifically for one-off races. That's a big potential. And in addition to why in China it's a massively vast, fast-growing sport, and you've got young people getting involved, we've got some major stigma issues with this sport. The stigma of keeping racing pigeons has been around for years, because unfortunately that stigma is, the old adage of flat cap, whip it at the side. And for me, when I was a kid, I didn't care that people took the piss out of me because I used to keep pigeons. Didn't care at all. But that's not the case. I'm not normal. A lot of people, the stigma of being involved or keeping racing pigeons is a real thing in this country, in the UK. Not necessarily around the world. In Holland and Belgium, there's no stigma with keeping racing pigeons. In China, there's definitely not. In the US, a bit probably, but not a massive amount. Now, how are we going to get rid of that stigma? Well, like it or not, a pigeon selling for £1 million starts to get that stigma and starts for the sport to be destigmatized. It does. It makes a big difference. So you're not going to have, if people want to keep in the old-fashioned way of it's a working man's sport and it's a hobby, then be prepared to see the sport decline and continue to decline. I'm talking about in the UK now. And if you look at where the sport is on the increase, i.e. China, the US, I would imagine it's consistent in Holland and Belgium. If you look at those countries, there's no stigma there. Why? And what needs to change? And that's publicity. That's people getting on the TV and radio talking about this as a big thing. And I think that's what needs to happen. And there's so much more that can be done. Here's another question. How hard would it be for every single race result raced anywhere in the world to be put on a central database? So not just club secretaries reporting to their feds and feds putting it into the BHW. I'm talking about any single pigeon race that happens out there, anywhere around the world, gets put onto a centralised database that can be syndicated around the world for everybody to see. Why can't that happen? Well, it can happen. It can happen. It just hasn't happened yet. Technically, it can happen easily. Practically, you'd have to get organisations agreeing to it, but why wouldn't they want to share their results with everybody around the world? And that then becomes, you can start then using that data to get people interested. There's so many more things that can be done. But as far as I'm concerned, what happened on Sunday morning is a great thing for the sport. It's made me think that there's so much more that can be done. I'm going to be looking to do a few things about it. And when you look at, like I said earlier, when you look at what Pippa are doing, they're revolutionising the business and the sport single-handedly. And that's a good thing. But in the UK, we need to compete more. We need to change that mindset, and we need to get out of the old mindset of it's just a hobby, it's way too expensive. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be competing with £1,000 pigeons. Let's see what my very first comment on Facebook Live on this is. I think the reason most people, younger people in China race is because they can earn a lot of money from it. And that's what we need to do. Exactly, Jonathan. Why can't we do the same? Why can't we do the same? We can. We've got to change the stigma, and we've got to change how easy it is for people to get into it, and we've got to bring the money into it. And why can't we have a proper betting system? Why can't we set up a proper system that enables people to be able to enter, compete, and earn bigger money from it? Because like I said earlier, you're going to have people that will they not care about the money, and that's fine. Like me, deep down for me, like I said, the biggest pleasure and the thing that keeps me hooked is that I love seeing birds fly around the garden, and I love the idea. I was hooked when I had a little hen when I think I was probably 16, and she flew all the way from Lerwick here into Leicestershire, and I was amazed that this little hen had flown 517 miles back to me. That hooked me. If you can instill that into people and see and make them realise how fascinating these animals are, then you'll get people hooked. You combine that with technology, which we've got now. I've just been looking at what Benzinga doing with their live results. All results should be live. A central database of all results should be there. We should have that. We bring technology into it. We bring online social media to it. We up our game. I love the British Homing World. I've been subscribing to the British Homing World even though I don't keep birds at the moment. But the reality is, it's not really changed in 30 years. And it's not going to be something that attracts new people really into it. Like I say, I love it, but we need to up our level of thinking. I think there should be a global publication. I think there should be a properly done social network for the sport. These things I'm thinking about, and maybe I should do them. My background's online, it has been for the last 25 years. Maybe I should get involved in shaking up things. But you're right, Jonathan. In China, people earn a lot of money. People compete for thousands, if not millions a year in China. Why can't we do that to some level? One of the other things I've got as well that I think is an issue, I don't know if it's ever been talked about, but the word fancier, it's no good. I know it's been used for years and years, probably hundreds of years, but it's an old phrase. The word fancier, because it's in modern times derived from the word fancy, which is not, that's if you fancy a woman or a man. I think it's an issue, and it's part of that stigma, rightly or wrong. Why can't we start calling ourselves keepers instead of fanciers? Because I think the word fancier is doing more negative than it is positive. It's only a small thing, but in the press, pigeon fanciers do this or pigeon fanciers do that. It's not helping us. It's not helping us. In the horse racing world, you're either a trainer or you're a jockey. Obviously that's not relevant. You're a trainer, you're a stud owner, or you're a bettor. Why can't we just do the same? Hey Gabriel, how are you? Thank you for tuning in. I think that's a problem and it needs to change. They're my thoughts on it. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. I've like I say, properly been engaging in the last week or so with different discussions. Actually started by Jimmy Hamilton. I don't know Jimmy personally, but he posted about the sale of Armando and I was captivated and felt compelled to get involved. There's so much we can do, and watching some of the response on Jimmy Hamilton's post made me get involved, but it also made me think a lot. There's so much we can do. This is a great hobby and sport, and it deserves to be opened up to the mainstream. It deserves to be where people that will never keep a pigeon in their life can be involved. And bringing new money into it and new sponsorship is a great thing. And that's what we need to do. And we need to change our way of thinking. And the organisations at the top genuinely need to bring in new ways of thinking. They need to embrace technology, which I know is happening. But there's so much more that I can see we can do to mean that by the time I'm in my mid-40s now, by the time I'm 60, in my mid-60s, that this sport and business and competition is thriving. So yeah, they're my thoughts. I'd love your opinions on it. My passion is reignited and sparked. I'm looking forward to getting set up and running again. I'm looking forward to competing in One Life races, but what I'm also looking for is how can I help make these things a reality? If One Life Racing continues to grow, which I have no reason to believe it won't, how can we harness that and get more people involved? That's the thing. Anyway, I will no doubt do more Facebook Lives about it, but I'd love your opinions and feedback. Thanks for watching. Catch you soon.